Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and it's time for this week's Friday Morning GM with co-host Vas Laricos. Vas, how you doing?
Doing very well, Ken. Looking forward to this huge divisional round matchup coming up this Saturday against the Texans. Playoffs, I think, went pretty well for the Ravens in the first round, but this is a big game. They have not played a conference championship game in 187 regular season or postseason games, so it's been a while.
Okay, and they haven't played a conference championship game in Baltimore since early 1971, after the 1970 season. Actually, I guess it might have even been late 1970. I don't really know when they played that one. Wow. But in the last one, George Blanda came in after being the star of the 1970 season in terms of a whole bunch of comeback wins off the bench, replacing Darryl LaMonica. And he, the Ravens gave him a loss. It would have been, perfect for that to happen to Joe Flacco as well. Would have been a kind of a cool story. I know a lot of people kind of upset he's out. I'm kind of also happy that it's not the Browns, honestly.
I agree. I think the familiarity with Lamar Jackson can be an advantage for opposing defenses. So I was hoping both of the divisional rivals were knocked out before they made it.
Now, we talked a little bit about weather before, and I want to ask you about this kind of up front here. The Ravens have had some extremely variances of weather through the years, but the thing that's been more in common is that the horrible postseason losses have both been in good weather. Largely good weather. It was a high wind game for Tennessee, but it was generally good weather. It was in the 60s, I believe, and it was in the 60s in 2006 as well. Right. It's just a beautiful day that made it way easy for Peyton Manning. Whereas in very bad weather, in the Mile High Miracle, Peyton Manning froze his aging noodle of an arm off, and that became very difficult for him, whereas Joe Flacco proved to be extremely wind resistant as a playoff quarterback. Give me your impressions on who would be more impacted by the kind of weather we're supposed to have on Saturday.
Well, I would say, when it's a windy game, teams tend to run a little bit more than they pass. It's sort of an interesting dichotomy here where the Ravens have the best rushing offense versus the Texans' second best DVOA rushing defense. On the other side, so strength on strength. The other side, it's sort of a weakness on a weakness. 4.9 yards per carry for the Ravens, allowing third worst in the league, versus Houston is, I think they're 30th DVOA or in that range.
Yeah, they're terrible.
So the Ravens also have the advantage in the kicking game on clear conditions. And I would say Stroud probably has a little bit better deep ball than Lamar. So I would say it would probably favor Houston a touch.
Okay. Well, that is unfortunate. Stroud, having played at Ohio State, certainly has had a little more in terms of bad weather games. What I meant to do before this show, and I didn't get it done, was to go check and see what Lamar's record was in games under 30 degrees. I don't think he's had many of them. This might be the coldest ever. That Atlanta game, which was the coldest ever in Baltimore last year, was actually Huntley winning at quarterback to put the Ravens into the playoffs. I'm trying to remember if Lamar's ever had a really cold game, but most of the super cold games were in the early Harbaugh era on the road in the playoffs in places like New England and Denver. So sure. even Kansas City, I think, was pretty cold at one time. So anyway,
it can certainly get cold out there. Yeah, I think I guess kind of dovetail into that conference championship topic, if you like. The nature of the sport is, ready for all conditions, ready for anything. Modern day gladiators. Football players are modern day gladiators, my dad likes to say. So it's a little bit against the spirit of the sport, I think. Some people say it's not fair because, they have to play in the snow, they have to play in the cold or the rain. Well, both teams are playing in the same conditions. And if you're going to be a champion, you should be able to overcome any condition. But I think there is. Sure, but I do think there's some pluses and minuses to potentially making the conference championships essentially a bowl game.
Yeah, there's some big advantages financially for the league, which is why I think, as much as I hate the idea entirely, I think we're probably coming to it. It really screws fans locally because they'd be moving this game to the South, potentially to Europe. Potentially to another market they're trying to develop. Imagine if they did it in Beijing or something. I mean, it's not even impossible to imagine that. They'll start with preseason games there and other things. They'll start with a regular season game there before they do this. But if they really want to build international appeal for the game, they'll take some big game like a conference championship and play it there. And think about what that does for fans who want to travel to games. I mean, your typical fan doesn't even take an airplane to the game. And if we're talking about Indianapolis, they think, oh, well, that's about 12 hours in a car, whatever it is. I don't know how far it is, and I'll just drive that. We're lucky we live in a Southwest city because every NFL team is within 2 hours of a Southwest airport. So there's a big advantage for traveling for football. It would really reduce that. It would greatly reduce the number of people who could go to a game. And, we know there were a lot of people in London, a lot of Ravens fans. So we know, you get some international Ravens fans, you get European Ravens fans. That's terrific for them. It's terrible for Baltimoreans having to travel to London for a game.
I agree with that completely. Also probably detrimental for the teams that are perennial conference championship teams, such as Kansas City was 4 or 5 in a row. I think they hosted, and 5 in a row, and they get a larger share of the local revenue than the other teams. I think the other big thing that would be counterproductive or detrimental is the lack of home field advantage. Just from the game experience perspective, having fans that are invested in the team is much preferable to, you see in March Madness, you get there and it's a wine and cheese type of crowd. And I don't think that's really would be as enjoyable for fans or the telecast or anything.
Definitely a bad thing for a season ticket holder. I mean, one of the things you hope, even though for a lot of teams it's just a lottery ticket, is that you play some home playoff games. And yes, it's true if you're a Bucks fan is a bad example because they made it last year. But if you're a Carolina fan, your chance of even playing any home playoff game is pretty limited. But you still want that hope. And
you should be rewarded for what you've earned.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the same place. I would really hate to see them do it, and yet I think that the gravitational pull towards this is so high. The opportunity for sponsorship is so great, and the opportunity to grow the league is so great. I don't see how they end up avoiding it, even though I think I just absolutely hate the idea.
Yeah, I think you're trending in that direction as well. All the more impetus to see if the Ravens can host that one this year before when the opportunity is available.
Yeah. All right. Some roster moves for the Ravens this week, and quite a fair amount of roster activity for this time of the year. But we saw Pepe Williams finally go to IR. His IR ends his season. He cannot be back in time for any Super Bowl or anything. He has to miss 4 games, and he can only actually miss 2. So he's done for the year. Gordon released. Now, Gordon is a weird case because he can be back. They can re-sign him to the practice squad. I imagine they will. They made other cuts on the practice squad, including Jeremy Lucien again, to make space there. So pretty good guess that Gordon will be back.
I heard there was a little bad blood maybe with the departure of this last time. So I'm not sure. It's a business, but you practice with the team all year. You finally make the team, then you're in the playoffs, and then you say, "All right, see ya." I don't know. I'm sure if they called him, he'd come back. The question is if they want him back.
Right. Let's say they do need one other guy they can really go to during the playoffs there, because even with only 3 games, there's a pretty good chance to lose a running back during that time, and they'd have to go get somebody. I don't know who it would be at this time, but they would really have to go get somebody. I don't think Owen Wright is a guy that they would elevate for this purpose. Now the guy they do have on the practice squad is Dalvin Cook, of course, and the question comes up is do they elevate him for any of these postseason games, or just go ahead and just elevate him as opposed to actually bring him up to the 53?
So I believe he has been promoted as of this recording. I believe he was promoted to the 53 earlier today. And I think they made the calculus that if you had 3 open spots on the 53, including Laquan Treadwell, who was also waived, your 2 game day elevations potentially become more valuable. You can maybe put more players you want on the field for the game by promoting Dalvin to the 53 and reserving those 2 call-ups for maybe other practice squad players.
Well, they have 3 guys who are supposed to be returning. They're in the middle of their window. So I guess Andrews is not ready, and that's bringing Cook up to the 53 is an indication to me that Andrews is not going to go this week. And I was getting that anyway. But Washington, Ardarius Washington should be in that group. And I don't know if he's ready or not. But I mean, the indication if you're cutting somebody like Pepe, if you're putting him on IR, is that he is ready. And then you have Devin Duvernay, and I think he brings a lot of speed that is lacking in this defense right now. Really has been lacking since Mitchell left. Now Hill has taken up an absolute workman-like burden, but they really do need another gadget guy to avoid using Flowers in that role.
I do expect Duvernay to be promoted. So essentially, Dalvin takes Gordon's spot. Duvernay takes Treadwell's spot, receiver for receiver. And the Horton or Hewitt, I always get them confused, the special teams coordinator. He did say Duvernay will have his return man job back when he re-enters the lineup because he had it, he earned it. He's an former all-pro return man. So then it leaves one spot, the Pepe spot. And I think we're expecting Mark Andrews, and I wouldn't be shocked if he does make an appearance this week. He apparently was sleeping in a hyperbaric chamber. He had full practice now, 2 days in a row. He could get the call up, or even if they could put him on the 53 and still deactivate him this week. At some point, you got to use him. Use all your 53. But it does leave you short at cornerback. It really does, and especially at defensive back as a whole. It was already a thin group. We now have the CB1 not practicing all week. We've been short safeties for a few weeks now. We touched on that. You're losing Pepe, and you're not saving a spot for Ardarius Washington or JAD. Maybe there's another lever to pull here. Maybe another player gets waived next week. I would think maybe the third or fourth quarterback.
Yeah, that's conceivable. Certainly. I think Tylan Wallace has been on the injury report. We need to get to the injury report in a minute or so too. But we didn't also probably mention that JAD is out until at least the Super Bowl, but he is another long-term potential replacement. So if they got any more thin, I would hate to go into I would hate to have the thinness at corner exposed in a playoff game in particular against any one of the three remaining quarterbacks in the AFC.
I agree. That's a big concern for me right now with Marlon. I guess we can get into the injury report. Marlon has not practiced since he was injured on that special teams play. Maybe I thought John Harbaugh, Eric DeCosta did a masterful job of managing snaps and workload this year. That was a mistake, I thought, to have. That was the game. First of all, Marlon's been in and out of the lineup with injuries all year. He's one of your crucial cornerstone guys. And that was also the game that Brandon Stevens was unavailable due to injury. They didn't need him out there trying to block that field goal or extra point, whatever it was, where he had his calf rolled up on. Other than that, the Ravens are pretty damn healthy. Jadeveon Clowney missed Wednesday with an illness, returned on Thursday. I believe Delshon Phillips, Malik Harrison may be limited as well. But it's a pretty clean injury report with the exception of Marlon Humphrey, who's a very important player.
Yeah, it is a big deal, and it has been several weeks now that the Texans had been having some of their pass rushers take a day off during the week because they're all dealing with some form of lower body injury. I think they're mostly ankles, and so they're trying to keep them all off the field. But Jerry Hughes is now the only one who's left on there. He's a veteran who's really their number 4 guy. Derek Barnett came in, has been absolutely homewrecker in the time he's been with the Texans, and of course they have Will Anderson and Grenard, who have been terrific this year, and are taking some days off, it seems, every week, almost like a Ronnie Stanley treatment for those two.
Yeah, apparently Anderson has been playing through a high ankle sprain. There was some optimism in the Ravens flock on Wednesday that maybe they weren't going to have their full complement of pass rushers, but on Thursday, as we record this, they returned to practice, and that is a matchup to watch. Houston has the 5th best pressure rate in the league this season, and we know that the Ravens' offensive tackles have been somewhat inconsistent.
Yeah. Definitely an area they really need to scheme around that. Lots of opportunities to do things. I mean, I think you get some of those players frustrated, and the Ravens have had some success with Myles Garrett in particular, but others as well, in terms of getting them to run themselves out of plays. So pass rushing is tiring to start with. That's one of the things that you always hear from any ex-pass rusher, and they always need to say, "Oh boy, there's nothing more tiring than rushing the passer." But it's truly much more. Effort has to be put in getting by a large man that has to be put in blocking one, as from the tackle's perspective. So I believe that. And it's very frustrating to a pass rusher who's going all out and trying to get a pressure on a play, to be beaten on a draw to his side because he ran himself out of that play. And hopefully that's something the Ravens can do some of in this week ahead.
Yeah, it's going to be one of the keys to the game. Houston had a pretty good pass rush in that Week 1 game, so I think that and covering Nico Collins, third best yards per target in the league this year. Those are the two, without Marlon Humphrey. Those are the two kind of X factors, I would say.
Yeah, they're big factors. I'm really unconcerned about the Ravens giving up deep passing. This is exactly what the Ravens are built to stop. I'd be more concerned that the Ravens' run defense maybe gets a little leaky under bad conditions, but I'm not even really concerned about that, because we'll have Hamilton back. He'll be they'll use him probably just about every down in the slot against either a big opponent or to try and help the run defense. So you really have a 6.5 man box, we'll call it, instead of a 6. And he's a hell of a additional half man there in terms of run defense. And I think that the Ravens potentially would do very well here. The big place where the Texans are terrible is on both interior lines. They're terrible interior linemen on the offensive side and on the defensive side in terms of dealing with the run. They had a number of injuries on the report. All three inside linebackers were out yesterday, I believe. So we had Collins, not Malik Collins. Who am I talking about? Cashman, and Perriman, and the third guy who was
Christian Harris
yesterday, Christian Harris from Bama.
Yeah. He had a pick 6 last week, didn't he?
Yep, he did.
It's I think it should be a good game, but the defensive linemen are now fresh with a couple weeks of rest and recovery. I think that run defense is just a numbers game. You can stop any you can stop any rushing attack if you do good numbers to it, and if you don't, then you can allow them to run. Interesting fact I uncovered working on an article this week for Baltimore Beatdown. Ravens 4.7 yards per pass allowed is the best mark since, I want to say, the 2009 Jets.
Okay.
However, their 4.9 yards allowed to the run is the third worst in the league. So they're actually allowing more yards per rush than pass in 2024 or 2023, which was a pretty interesting paradox there.
If you found a $100 bill on the ground, you wouldn't walk past it. So don't pass up a chance at easy cash with MyBookie. MyBookie has the biggest online selection of odds and contests to fill all your sports betting needs, anytime, anywhere. So you can turn that sports knowledge into cash in your wallet. Bet on the NFL, college bowl games, or play for your share of big cash prizes in the weekly blackjack tournaments. And if you've been waiting for the right time to get in on the action, that time is now. Make your winning move today. Sign up at MyBookie and use the promo code RAVENS to claim your deposit match, redeemable up to $1,000. Again, that's promo code RAVENS to claim your bonus. Experience the thrill of sports betting right from the comfort of your home. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.
I have them at only 4.5 yards per rush allowed. That number seemed kind of high to me. Now that includes kneels. So if you take out kneels, it could be 4.7 or something. I actually have that in my other spreadsheet. I'm just take 1 second and do this. I know that's always really bad radio to do this. Now 4.6, including the, so it's bad, but they've given up an extra basically half yard. And the point I've been making the entire season is basically that's a design choice. So you build a stadium, some of the seats have to be disadvantaged in order for you to get in more seats. Got to think this is one of those choices, and they've been a remarkable pass defense who's taken everything away. The passer rating the last 5 weeks where they played good quarterbacks. So toss out the Pittsburgh game where they didn't even have their great personnel. But the 5 weeks before that, they played Herbert, Stafford, Lawrence, Purdy, and Tua. On passes of 15-plus yards, opposing quarterbacks had a 47.5 QB rating. So they take that away even from good quarterbacks, and they will take it away as needed from Stroud. I think they'll be even better if he dares to throw it there. And there's going to be some underneath throws, and we'll see how that develops into bigger plays, whether there's some tackling issues or whatnot in the secondary. But they've been extremely good at taking away the deep pass.
Yes. And that's a choice that I would make 100% of the time.
Yep.
Definitely allow them to. Even Bill Belichick, even in his days at the Giants, he would design a game plan to force the other team to run because it's not as efficient or as dangerous as pass. So, I think that's a great way to go about it. I hope they continue that.
Let's keep going here and talk about the Peacock situation. This is something that I think pissed off a lot of people, not only because it happened, but then because NBC decides to celebrate it on the regular network TV the day after. Just like we're just fresh from having to pay $6 for nothing. and then you tell us this.
I think it's getting ridiculous. When they first started cutting the cord, I said, "Oh, this is great. You can have a custom program, and you don't have to pay for what you don't want, and you pay for what you do." But now it's you need to have Amazon Prime for Thursday night, and you need to have something else for the London games, and you need to have this and that and this and that, and it is getting ridiculous the amount of different streaming services you need to watch a full season. It almost seems like probably 10 years from now, they're going to want to consolidate it again. It's a money grab. I don't necessarily blame NBC for saying, let's force this upon the public because it's probably the marquee playoff game of the week. I saw this graphic, and I want to say 98 out of the top 100 most viewed television programs in the year 2023 were football.
Yeah.
So it's a captive audience. It's really one of the only places where somebody will sit there through a commercial. So I don't know. Then again, these TV contracts are what's financing the rise in the salary cap and players earning more than they ever had before. So it's capitalism, but there's got to be a better way to do it than have 8 different streaming services.
Yeah, it's something that would make it easy. I mean, I'll tell you one thing that was really pissed me off about is the change away from DirecTV. The change, DirecTV was a fantastic one-size-fits-all shop for getting all your football. And my entire house is kind of built around DirecTV and being able to watch 7 games at once in our living room. And it's really pissed me off they took that away, and now it's a big project to redo that with computers to do YouTube and whatnot. It's I know nobody's really going to feel sorry for me for that exact thing, but it is one of these things that I'm really pissed off about. It doesn't you don't consider the fans' investment in all that before you make a change like that really impacts people. A lot of people have DirecTV setups in their house. I'm not the only one, so kind of pisses me off about that.
Well, yeah, and it's just confusing. My mom's calling me at 3:30. How do I get this channel? I'm walking her through how to download a streaming service. It's I don't know. I guess at least it's a month-to-month deal instead of you got to pay for a whole year just to watch one game or something.
Let's save this last topic for just a second, because we did have one mailbag question come in. It's from Lyman's Backpack, at Lyman's Backpack, who says, why did the Ravens sign Dalvin Cook to the roster when they had enough practice squad elevations to make it through the playoffs? It is a legitimately excellent question. I didn't even expect it to happen. I'm hearing it for the first time from you that it actually happened earlier today. Why?
I assume that if you have 3 open roster spots, maybe that was the best use of one and 2 practice squad elevations per game. They figured we're going to have Dalvin on for all 3 of the God willing postseason games, and the other 2 call-ups we're going to rotate between Josh Ross and maybe a couple other guys. I guess that's the calculus that they made. Sometimes they do things that aren't necessarily the wisest, shrewdest maneuver to kind of give the player a little bit of goodwill, whether it be what do they bring up, Ben Mason. He was one of the P squad elevations where they definitely didn't need a second fullback. They could have used that other places, but they kind of reward players that way, and maybe they've been impressed with what they've seen from Dalvin in the practice field.
Could have even been a condition, I guess, of the signing originally, and they're fulfilling a promise here. It just does not seem like smart football to do it. The other guy who doesn't have any place on the field in the postseason, but has taken up a spot on the 53, is Malik Cunningham. And, that's a guy that there is just no reason at all to not find a way to, Well, if you could find a way to get him a small injury and or designate him with a small injury to IR, that would probably be the easiest and cleanest way to do it.
Or Big Salah is another one that hasn't been.
Good call.
I think where there's a will, there's a way. If push comes to shove, somebody can step on Salah's foot and he can go to IR, and DaCosta can find a way to get another player we need up to the dressed out.
Yeah. All right. Now we had another article from our friend Gordon McGinnis at PFF, who you said to me and had one unrestricted free agent per team. You go ahead and set this up.
Yeah. So he's basically IDing one. I don't know if he's saying this is the best possible use, but just a fit, a match. And his match for the Ravens, somewhat surprisingly, was Odell Beckham Jr., considering all the UFAs they have and all the players are going to leave. And his big point to make was that Odell's 2.28 yards per I'm sorry, what is that?
Route run.
Route run. Couldn't follow my own shorthand. Since week 6 is the 12th best in the league. He also has Matabike going to Detroit, Geno Stone going to Green Bay, Jadeveon Clowney going to the Rams, our old friend Hollywood Brown going to the Browns, and neither Patrick Queen or Kevin Zeitler are listed as one of the top 32 fits. So I thought that was worth discussing. The prospect of bringing OBJ back and whether that would be, I don't think he's the highest priority, but I don't think he's the lowest either.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think that, in an environment where there's money is going to have to be eyedroppered out. You look at him and he's had relatively few snaps since in the time Gordon is mentioning. So his high for snaps since week 6, which is the time given, actually since week 5 for that matter, is only 38. So he says they have not played him a lot. And that's, I think, been one of the things that benefited him. The first game against Houston, he played 59 snaps. Second game, he's down to 39. And every game since then, the highest has been 38 and a low of 18 snaps. So they've had him on a pitch count. It's actually been a very similar pitch count. A lot of these games has been exactly 35 to 38 snaps. Mm-hmm. They've kind of decided about how much they can get out of him. 2.28 yards per route run. Let's kind of put that in context. Each team has 5 eligible receivers. Okay. So that yards per route run, multiply it by 5, you can get a yards per pass play projected out. Now, receivers get a slightly higher share. Fullbacks, for example, get a much lower share in terms of yards per route run, running backs as well. But if you can get 2.28 out of one of your receivers, that's terrific in terms of that. That has been the big surprise of Odell's year, has been yards per target has been much higher than at any time after, I believe, his first year in the league. It's been close to 9 yards per target, 8 and change. And that's been a big plus for the Ravens to get that kind of production out of OBJ. I do think it comes with strings attached, is that you probably have to plan to spend him a lot extra, but I'd be at a point where I'd say there is an amount I would pay to have Odell back. And I think the way they structured it is good. They're saying basically, if we can come up with a deal by X and such a date, then we'll do it. And if we can't, then we appreciate you restructuring and doing some void year manipulation that'll allow us at least to move some cap around.
Yeah, I think that was a very good way to structure it, beneficial for the team multiple ways. You could kind of keep him out of the bidding more in the first wave and then come back. So I think maybe Gordon, his overall point might be that offense is more valuable than defense. I think we did see that play out in the wild card round where you have the Browns. Who are the other two? Let's see. The Browns, the Cowboys, and the Steelers were all top
Miami,
6 in defensive DVOA, and they all lost. So I think that is, the only team. So those were the top 3 of the top 6. The other 3 are San Fran, Baltimore, and the Jets, who Jets didn't make the playoffs. But I think it is an offensive-driven league, and I would say that looking forward to the offseason, even though you might have some bigger names or homegrown guys on the defense, you got to make sure that receiving core stays at a championship level.
Yeah, it is a way to bring somebody back that can probably help the team. I think if you want to bring Aguilar back, I'd be fine with that too. Hopefully it wouldn't be a lot of money. Cannot afford a bunch of mid-range contracts at wide receiver. And you might still be in a position where your second pick needs to be at wide receiver. I think, we've talked about this ad nauseum almost, but the first pick almost I think OT. It has to be. It has to really be a guy who can play left tackle, not one of these. Oh, I think he could play left tackle. I think he'd right tackle. He could even play guard if he needs. Well, no, don't give me a guy who can play guard. I want a guy who's no doubt about a tackle. So,
right. Unless an apex pass defender, whether that's a lockdown corner or a really monstrous, down lineman, can't miss guy is there, I would definitely go tackle first pick.
Yeah, and this is not a place where the Ravens in particular would draft a BPA at some positions. Like, I don't see this as being an interior offensive line pick, even if they like the guy. I do not see this being a safety or a running back, certainly, or an inside linebacker. I think that, even if they found their guy, even if they lost, let Queen go and whatnot, I think Simpson is gonna get a trial, at least a platoon on that weak side. So I think we're looking at those exterior positions, the ones that impact the passing game are going to be the ones that they look at.
Yeah, Simpson, I don't know if we touched on it, but yeah, he looked pretty good down the stretch, better than I anticipated.
Yeah. So it was interesting in his article, Gordon had a couple other guys listed. First of all, he has T. Higgins as being a great fit for the Jacksonville Jaguars, which I thought was great. Cincinnati Bengals, he has Dalton Schultz being a fit for them. And the Cleveland Browns, interesting enough, Marquise Brown, back with Cleveland. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think they could probably use some help at receiver. Cooper's getting old. Elijah Moore was banged up. Hollywood Brown's not a number one receiver, but I think he's one of the better number two receivers in the league, and that's what he should be viewed as. And I think he got a little bit of a bad reputation for the way things ended in Baltimore, but he's a high-end number two for sure. One of the top 30, 40 probably receivers in the league.
Yeah. I don't know if you mentioned it before, but they have Justin Madubuike to the Detroit Lions is one of the ones that he has, and Geno Stone to the Packers. And let me see if there are any other ones. Kansas City Chiefs are Chris Jones. Jadeveon Clowney to the Rams.
Yep, to the Rams. Yeah, I think that would be a perfect fit. With him playing off of Aaron Donald would really be great for him. Stone is a very interesting player to me. I think his playoff play could have a pretty wide swing to what he gets on the open market next year.
Yeah,
you get another interception or two in the playoffs, then you really are in that double-digit AAV range, I think.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I mean, Stone is obviously he's had some problems with tackling this year that have probably held down his contract value a little bit, and we'll see how that ends up. But I think you're exactly right. In 3 games, if he had 2 interceptions, and it's always possible. Just weather conditions will certainly help it. He's exactly the kind of guy who exploits the overthrow, so it's a good situation for him.
Yeah, I guess the last thing to mention, there was no mention from Gordon of either Kevin Zeitler or Patrick Queen. I guess Zeitler, I can understand he's getting a little older. He plays. Patrick Queen made a second-team All-Pro, and he's not one of the 32 most coveted. Could be a little bit interesting as far as the way some players are valued across the league. And then again, maybe this is just Gordon's opinion.
Yeah, we'll see how the market plays out for Patrick Queen. I think some team will want him, and it may be a case where there's a 1A and a 1B for some of these teams that really have cap space, and there's somebody in that group that can afford Queen that we'll see. But it's not obvious to me that Queen is going to get $18 million a year. He's another guy. I think putting him on a national stage and hopefully not getting him exposed by any of the 3 quarterbacks that remain in the AFC would go a long way towards solidifying his value, because that's been one of the problems for all these years, is that Queen and his pass coverage have been slow to come along.
Yeah, definitely. So anyway, we'll see how it goes, but I thought that was interesting. So I thought Gordon was probably going to go with Madubuike. That's what everybody seems to peg as their number one guy. But you got to keep that offense at a high level, I think, the weaponry for Lamar with the offensive tackle, that protection, as we've seen with even Houston. They're in the second round. What are their best players? Offensive tackle, quarterback, wide receiver, edge rushers, and a corner. And you can go a long way with that.
Yeah. All right. Always a pleasure to do this show with you, Vas. Tell folks where they can find your work online.
I am at Vasilis Beatdown on Twitter X, Vasilis Beatdown, author and editor for Baltimore Beatdown blog. And I encourage you to also check out my other podcast, called The Ravensway Pod, at Ravensway Pod on Twitter, streams on YouTube every Thursday night.
All right, very cool. Other folks out there who want to be on a film study short, hit me up. I have all kinds of stuff. Got a guy from Australia who wants to talk about what it's like to be a fan down there and what extremes you have to go to watch games and whatnot. So I'm really looking forward to talking to him about that. And if you've got an idea, it doesn't have to be a super technical idea, but something you're passionate about that might take 30 minutes or so, send me a few notes on it. I'll get back to you very quickly. And we'll hopefully have a show boiled down that we can record similarly quickly. I'm looking for material for the off season. If you have that piece, it might take 4 episodes to go. So I had one guy talking about evolution of rules in the game a few years ago, and he did 4 pods on it. Terrific, interesting stuff to talk about. And the off season is the perfect time for that. If there's a pre-Super Bowl topic, hit me up as soon as possible. We'll have that 2-week window. If the Ravens still go, it'll be a hot time to get a topic in. And I want to hear from you guys. For Voss Laricos, this is Ken McCusick saying goodbye, and we'll talk to you next week on Friday Morning GM.